Do you ever get angry and frustrated with yourself because you feel like you should be different than you are? The problem is never who you really are. It's the ideas that you have in your head about who you're supposed to be. You're listening to Pure Light, where we explore how you can believe in yourself and be happy with who you are so that you feel worthy of your craziest dreams and confident in your power to make them happen. My name is Ailey. I'm a coach, writer, and a Kundalini yoga and meditation teacher. This is episode 73, and it's about where self-judgment comes from. So when I turned 20, I felt like I had to grow up and be an adult and figure out what I wanted to do with my life. I was trying to be all those things that I thought I was supposed to be, like a good employee and the perfect girlfriend. And I had ideas about what those things meant. So I did my best to live up to them. So for example, a good employee would say yes whenever they were asked to do something. And so I would always say yes. And so I would always do whatever was in alignment with the thing that I thought I was supposed to be. And then I would judge myself whenever I didn't live up to those expectations. So there was all this noise in my head about, you shouldn't have done that. You should have done this. What were you thinking? And it would get progressively worse and worse. So in my late 20s, I had a major career upset, which I've talked about here before. And I also ended a 9-year relationship. And once those events started happening, I started questioning everything about my life because all of a sudden those things that I had been trying to be were no longer like a major priority. And as part of that transition and questioning, I started clearing out my condo and getting rid of the things that I didn't need or want. And one day as I was sorting through my stuff, I was sorting through some files, my eyes started watering. Like, I kind of fell down to the floor and I was like on my knees on a pile of files, bawling with these waves of heat washing over me. And in that moment, I could see that all the things I had been telling myself were just illusions. So they were just ideas in my head that I had been judging myself by. So they weren't the truth. They weren't real. They were the rules I had created for myself in my mind about how I needed to be and how I needed to fit in order to be liked and loved and accepted and all that stuff. So they were just stories I'd been telling myself about how I was unworthy and undeserving and how I needed to be something else in order to be worthy and deserving. And in that moment, I realized that I had a choice. Like I could either keep striving to be those things or free myself of those ideas, so let them go and just be me. Most of us have two selves, the self that we really are and the self that we think we're supposed to be. I'm going to call them the true self and the ideal self. So the true self is who you really are, and the ideal self is that idea in your head of who you think you're supposed to be. So self-judgment comes from comparing yourself to who you think you're supposed to be. It comes from seeing how you measure up to your ideal self. But the ideal self only exists in your head. It's an expectation that you've built up. And a number of things have probably contributed to that. Like in our culture, I think there are ideas about how you're supposed to be, like nice, responsible, the good girl or the good guy, all that kind of stuff. And then I think we layer onto that what we see in other people's lives and what we want from that. And so it's like this compilation of all this information we've taken in over the course of our lives. And it creates a presumption of perfection because we assume that we have to be all of those things, which means that the expectations are high. There's a lot of pressure. And because of that, there's also like a sense of obsessing about it and constantly comparing yourself to others and constantly comparing yourself to those ideas in your head and hoping you'll measure up, which usually leaves you frustrated and angry and jealous. So that can make it seem like you're the problem, like you need to change and fix yourself, but that is not the truth. The problem is never who you really are. It's just the ideas you have in your head about who you're supposed to be. So it's the fact that you have an ideal self that you're trying to measure up to. Because those are the things that get in the way of you just being who you are and being happy with who you are. So this comparison to your ideal self is usually automatic and unconscious. Like it's a mental habit. It isn't something that you necessarily realize that you're doing all the time. And awareness is the thing that can transform this. So the next time that you notice that you're judging yourself, instead of slipping into a state of negativity about it, get really curious about what's happening. So say to yourself, ooh, that's so interesting. I wonder what that's about. And be like a detective. See what you can uncover about your ideal self. Because the more that you can bring your ideal self to light, the less you'll judge yourself against it. Stop assuming that you should be your ideal self. Whatever ideas you have about who you're supposed to be are unquestioned assumptions, and they're based on your mind's default programming. So they're based on all that information you've taken in and not even totally processed. Because when you have that ideal self in your head, it doesn't leave you a lot of room to be human. So give yourself permission to be human. Give yourself permission to be exactly who you are. There are a number of episodes that are related to this on comparison and jealousy and more. I'll include links to those in the show notes. Find them at purelightpodcast.com. And in the next episode, I'll dig more deeply into the implications of self-judgment. So what happens beyond just the sense of self-negativity or that anger and frustration? If this is something that's a challenge for you, I can help you change that pattern. I have spaces opening up in my coaching practice next month. To get an invite for a free coaching session, sign up for my Sunday self-love strategies. You can do that at purelightpodcast.com, or you can also do that on the coaching page at eileecutan.com. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, may you be guided by your light.